A man sits alone in a quiet stone room in Jerusalem. The oil lamp casts long shadows against the wall. The year is roughly 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. He is a warrior. He is a king. His name is David. He is perfectly safe tonight. His borders are secure. But the words he is pressing into the parchment in front of him are dripping with a violent agony that is absolutely not his own. You can almost hear the scratch of his pen in the quiet room. Lean in and look at what he is writing. He writes about a man surrounded by vicious enemies. He writes about bones being violently pulled out of joint. He writes about a throat so dry it feels baked in the sun. He writes about a heart melting like wax inside a collapsing chest. And then he writes a line that should freeze you right where you are sitting. They have pierced my hands and my feet. Here is what most people miss about that sentence. David is recording a highly specific forensic profile of a public execution. He is describing a victim slowly suffocating under the weight of their own suspended body, their wrists and ankles shattered by iron. There is just one massive problem. The Roman Empire does not exist yet. The cross does not exist yet. Crucifixion will not be invented by the Persians for another 300 years, and it will not be perfected by the Romans for centuries after that. Yet here is a Jewish king sitting in the middle of the ancient world, predicting the exact medical symptoms of a Roman execution a millennium before a Roman soldier ever touches a hammer. We will come back to that hammer, but not yet. First, you need to understand what you are actually holding when you open the first half of your Bible. This is not a random collection of ancient verses. This is not a list of lucky guesses. This is not a mythology pieced together by grieving followers after the fact. This is a mathematical, geographical, and historical countdown. Think of the Old Testament as a narrowing lens. It starts wide, covering the entire human race. But century by century, prophet by prophet, it zooms in. It violently cuts away the options until it points to one exact bloodline, one tiny location, and one precise manner of death. The clock begins ticking in the absolute worst moment of human history. A woman stands in the dirt outside a closed gate. Behind her is the only home she has ever known, a paradise she just broke with her own two hands. Her name is Eve. She is wearing the skins of an animal. She smells blood for the very first time. She is terrified. You can imagine the cold dread sinking into her chest. The world is fractured. Death has entered the room. But before God exiles her into the wilderness, he speaks into the dark. He looks at the serpent who deceived her, and he makes a promise that will echo across the next 4 millennia. He says that the woman will have an offspring, and this offspring will crush the serpent's head even as his own heel is bruised. It is a flash of light in a pitch black room. The Hebrew word used here is zerah. It means seed or offspring. But here is the critical detail. The word is singular. God is not talking about an army. He is not talking about a philosophy. He is talking about one specific solitary man, one descendant who will step onto the battlefield, take the venom to the heel, and crush the head of evil forever. The lens is wide. The promise is given to the entire human race. But the timeline has officially started. Fast forward centuries. The lens begins to aggressively narrow. It drops past entire continents. It bypasses the great dynasties of China. It ignores the towering pyramids of Egypt. It skips right over the marble columns of Greece. The lens zooms in on the Middle East. Then it zooms in on the bloodline of Abraham, then the tribe of Judah. But it gets stranger. By the time we reach the 8th century before Christ, the prophet Micah is looking at the map of Israel. If you were going to predict where the ultimate king of the universe would be born, you would choose Jerusalem. It has the gold. It has the temple. It has the walls. Micah ignores the capital city. He points his bony finger at a dot on the map so insignificant you would miss it if you blinked. A dusty, rural shepherd's outpost with a population of maybe a few hundred people. Bethlehem Ephrathah. Micah writes down a prophecy that is staggering in its precision. He says that out of this tiny, overlooked village will come a ruler whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Think about the sheer statistical impossibility of this. Micah is calling out the exact zip code of the Messiah, 700 years in advance. He is telling you exactly where to stand, to watch the sky split open. And if you have ever felt like your life is too small for God to notice, look at Bethlehem. He bypasses the empire to dwell in the dirt. That is who he is. The lens has narrowed from a global bloodline to a specific village. But God is not done. He is about to give you the psychological and physical profile of the man stepping into the timeline. Stay with me, because this is where the picture gets deeply uncomfortable. In that same era, another prophet named Isaiah is writing in Jerusalem. The nation of Israel is desperate. They are waiting for the Messiah, the anointed one. They want a warrior with a sword who will ride in on a white horse, slaughter their political enemies, and put a crown on his head. Isaiah sits down and writes something that shatters every expectation they have. He writes a profile of a man who will be despised, a man who will be rejected, a man of sorrows, intimately acquainted with grief. Imagine reading Isaiah 53 for the first time. Isaiah writes that this man will have no majestic beauty to attract us to him. He will be led like a lamb to the slaughter. He will not open his mouth to defend himself. And then Isaiah writes the heaviest words in the Old Testament. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Isaiah is not describing a political conqueror. He is describing a substitute. 7 centuries before Jesus of Nazareth breathes the night air of the Garden of Gethsemane, Isaiah is recording the exact reason he will bleed. Not for his own crimes, but for yours. The lens is now terrifyingly tight. We have the bloodline. We have the exact village. We have the suffering profile. The target is painted. Stop for a second and look at what is happening here. The lens is getting tighter and tighter. We have moved from a global bloodline to a microscopic zip code to a terrifyingly precise psychological profile of a suffering servant. If you are starting to see how perfectly woven this timeline is, how impossible it is for this to be a random accident, take a second to subscribe to the channel. We are just getting started, because now the prophets are about to introduce the math. 500 years before Jesus is born, the prophet Zechariah picks up the pen. The Jewish people are still dreaming of a military conqueror, a king who will ride a war horse, crushing the skulls of their oppressors and lifting their nation to glory. But Zechariah looks into the future and sees a completely different kind of triumph. He writes, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, not a stallion, not a chariot, a beast of burden." Kings in the ancient world rode horses when they were going to war. They rode donkeys only when they were coming in peace. Zechariah is telling you, 5 centuries in advance, that this king is not coming to shed your blood. He is coming to shed his own. Pay attention to this, because the stakes are about to reach their absolute peak. We have the location, we have the profile, we have the transportation, but the timeline is missing the most important piece of all. When? When exactly will this happen? Enter the book of Daniel. Daniel is not a shepherd. He is not a rural preacher. He is an exiled statesman, a high-ranking official walking the polished marble floors of Babylon. He is an old man now. He has survived lions. He has survived mad kings. One night, he is reading the ancient scrolls by candlelight, praying over the ruins of his nation. And while he is still speaking, the angel Gabriel breaks into the room. Gabriel does not just give Daniel comfort. He gives him a literal mathematical countdown. A prophecy known as the 70 Sevens. It is a block of time decreed for the Jewish people and the holy city. But here is the part nobody tells you. Gabriel breaks the math down. He tells Daniel that from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One comes, there will be exactly 7 sevens and 62 sevens. That is 483 biblical years. Think about the sheer weight of this. A Jewish exile in the capital of a pagan empire is writing down a mathematical formula that will set an alarm clock for the universe. When you trace history, King Artaxerxes of Persia issues the decree to rebuild Jerusalem's walls in the year 444 BC. If you count forward exactly 483 prophetic years using the ancient 360-day calendar, you land squarely, undeniably, in the early 30s AD. You land exactly in the lifetime of Jesus of Nazareth. The clock started ticking. Across the rise and fall of Alexander the Great, across the bloody rebellions of the Middle East, across the terrifying rise of the iron teeth of the Roman Empire, the countdown did not stop. It marched steadily toward one specific man. And Gabriel told Daniel one more terrifying detail. He said that after those 62 sevens, the Anointed One would be cut off and have nothing. Not crowned, cut off, executed, eliminated. The math lands perfectly on a wooden cross. The countdown hits 0 on a skull-shaped hill outside Jerusalem. It is the early 30s AD. The 483 years are up. The Anointed One is about to be cut off, and the lens has narrowed down to a single wooden beam. We said we would come back to that hammer, the one King David wrote about in a quiet stone room a millennium ago. Now watch what happens next. Roman soldiers throw a bruised and bloody carpenter onto the wood. They pull his arms wide, and they raise the heavy iron hammers. With every strike, a 1,000-year-old prophecy is driven into reality. Remember the words David wrote in Psalm 22? They have pierced my hands and my feet. The Roman Empire did not exist when David wrote that. The punishment of crucifixion was completely unknown to the Jewish king. Yet here is Jesus of Nazareth, bleeding out through shattered wrists, exactly as the song described. But the details get even sharper. David also wrote in that same ancient song, "They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Look at the foot of the cross. A squad of Roman executioners sits in the dirt. They have stripped the prisoner. His tunic is seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. Instead of tearing it, they pull out a set of dice. They gamble for the bloody clothes of the Son of God, fulfilling a lyric written 1,000 years before they were born, without having any idea they are playing a part in a divine script. This is not a religious fable. The first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, a man who was not a Christian, recorded the undeniable reality of this moment. In his Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus confirms that Jesus was a real historical figure who was condemned to the cross by Pontius Pilate. The execution happened. The timeline landed exactly where it was supposed to. If you have ever been awake at 3 in the morning, sitting in a dark house, waiting for news, you know the unbearable weight of that kind of waiting. Maybe you were staring at your phone, waiting for a doctor to call. Maybe you were sitting by a front window, waiting for the headlights of a car to sweep across the driveway, listening for a specific footstep on the porch. You trust the person who said they would come, but the dark makes you doubt. The Old Testament was humanity waiting in the dark. For thousands of years, the world sat in the brutal night of war, famine, exile, and silence. But they had a promise. A seed would come. A king would ride a donkey. A suffering servant would take the blow. And then, on a Friday afternoon in Jerusalem, the footstep finally sounded. The door opened. The promise kept his word. He took the venom to his heel, just like God told Eve he would. He was crushed for our iniquities, exactly as Isaiah saw. And as he suffocated on the wood, the greatest, most hyper-specific rescue mission in the history of the universe was finished. As you close the Old Testament, you are left with three undeniable truths. First, the Old Testament is not a random collection of disjointed moral fables. It is a singular, integrated arrow pointing to one man. From Genesis to Malachi, it is a unified architectural blueprint designed by an author operating outside of time. Second, if God can engineer a hyper-specific rescue mission across 4,000 years of human chaos, empires, and wars, and land it on the exact day he promised, he can absolutely be trusted with the chaos of your life tomorrow morning. Your waiting is not wasted. Your dark night is not forgotten. Third, and most importantly, the timeline did not just end at a cross. It ended with his hands open for you. The king who was promised in Eden, profiled by Isaiah and timed by Daniel, did not endure the nails to prove a mathematical point. He did it because he loves you. Which of these Old Testament prophecies blew your mind the most? Was it the math of Daniel or the zip code of Micah? Tell me below in the comments. The timeline was written for you. Now, it is your turn to step into the story.